Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about inspecting a steel aerial ladder. I have an example of one of our vintage trucks. This is a 1989 75-foot LTI steel ladder. The things I'm going to talk about today are typical to any steel ladder or any welded steel assembly. Okay, specifically, we're going to look at the condition of the structure of the ladder itself. We're looking for any kind of defects or any damage to this, just like in our other inspections. It'll be readily apparent if there is something wrong with the truck, and we'll probably find a few things, minor defects in this area as we go through the inspection. So let's take a look at the base of the ladder right here. As you can see, in the middle is the waterway. This is where the waterway is supplied up to the nozzle at the end of the ladder. You want to look at that. It's typically an aluminum assembly, and you can see an aluminum weld right here. You want to inspect the welds and make sure there's no obvious cracks. You'll also notice that the aluminum structures on this ladder are not painted, whereas the steel parts of the ladder are painted, and that's to prevent corrosion, like you see right here. This truck has been out in the weather in South Florida since 1989, so you would expect to see these kinds of chips and dings in the paint and the resultant rust on the ladder itself. We do employ a third-party inspection. Underwriters Laboratories inspects our aerial trucks at least once a year, and they put them under different kinds of loads. That's not what the scope of this video is about. This is a visual inspection by the driver engineer. Okay, at the base of every ladder, there's a major component called the pivot pin. That's this pin right here. You can see it on this side and you can see it on this side. This is the pin around which the ladder rotates. On the outside here, you can see a retaining bolt that holds that pin in place. It's imperative that that bolt be inspected, as well as all the other bolts and attaching hardware on the ladder, to make sure that they're intact and they haven't come loose, or in some cases actually gone missing. So I can see this bolt is in place. Now I want to look at the other side, make sure this bolt is in place. This is a basic LTI design, but every steel ladder will have a pivot pin and some type of retention hardware. It just varies by the type of truck. Okay? On this side, the ladder's comprised, you can see, of three sections. This is the base rail section, or the widest point. Then you have the mid section, and you have what we call the fly section. Right now it's in the fully retracted position, so we can only inspect what we can see. What you should do during an inspection is extend the ladder all the way out, and then inspect it from the base all the way out, from on top of the ladder, and then on the ground underneath the ladder. And we'll demonstrate that in a little while. Right now, let's talk about steel welds on the ladder. As you can see on the side of this ladder, this is the area where these two parts are welded together. The paint is smooth. There's no obvious cracks, which would manifest themselves as a rust spot on a steel ladder. Okay, but I don't see any rust areas, just small chips in the paint here. This weld looks good. Even though this paint surface is completely gone, the structure is still intact, and I don't see any cracks in these welds down here either. So we want to systematically look at every weld on the ladder for evidence of a crack. I don't see any here. Then as we look at each section where the handrail is welded to the other parts of the truck, we want to look at each and every one of those welds as well as we work our way out the ladder. Okay, now we're on the underside of the ladder and we're looking at the base rail assembly. You can see the welds in this area. We're going to look to make sure there's no damage. This is the main brace of the ladder assembly. And then this is what we call the lift cylinder. This is the large hydraulic lift cylinder that raises and lowers the ladder. There obviously should be no leaks around the hydraulic lines that control the ladder, all the way from the selector valve all the way out to the holding valve on the lift cylinder. If these lines break, there's a valve within this block that prevents the lift cylinder from collapsing, so it's a safety device. Right? Now we talked about the pivot pin over there. There's also a pivot pin for the main lift cylinder. This also has some attaching hardware, and I believe the bolt that holds it in place is on the inside here. So we need to look and make sure that this bolt is in place, just like we did on the other main pivot pin. Remember, you have two lift cylinders, one on the right side, one on the left side. So the inspections need to be repeated on both sides of the aerial device. All right? If you look in this area right here, this is a hydraulic motor that allows the aerial to rotate. It drives a very large pinion gear right here that's engaged into what we call the ring gear right here. Okay? There's two bolts underneath that hold the pinion gear in place. Remember, I said this is a typical 75-foot steel aerial ladder. These components on this truck are particular to this truck, but every ladder truck has these components. It just depends on who made it. But essentially the operational parts are the same. So you would be doing this kind of inspection on any type of aerial device. This allows you to rotate the ladder 360 degrees. If you look inside here, you can see the waterway as it goes up the underside of the ladder. Okay? And this shiny steel rod is the actual extension cylinder. If you pan out all the way there, you'll see the remainder of the extension cylinder. That extends the ladder from its bedded position all the way to fully extended or anywhere in between. You can see that those are all hydraulically controlled, and they have hydraulic valves as well. You need to inspect all of these lines, make sure there's no leaks and no damage to the hydraulic lines as you do your systematic inspection. Okay, I'm going to be using a 6-foot pike pole as a pointer as we do an underside inspection of this 75-foot steel aerial ladder. Okay. We left off last time talking about the extension cylinders. I said they're right in this area, so we're looking for any hydraulic leaks. As we come out here, we can see the end of the hydraulic cylinder right here. There's another seal right there in that area. We'll make sure it's not leaking in that area. All right, this is an electric pipe chase right here. The electrical controls for the aerial. Inside that, you need to check this mounting hardware, make sure that it's in place. Right, and we're inspecting the waterway. The aluminum waterway I talked about before, make sure there's no damage to the waterway. Once again, it has two extension cylinders. We want to inspect this one as well for any damage or leaks at the seal. Right above the lift cylinder here, you see what we call a sheave wheel. The sheave wheel, okay, guides this cable. This cable is what allows us to extend the other sections of the ladder by way of the hydraulic extension cylinders. So we want to make sure that these sheave wheels are in place and that the cable doesn't have any obvious signs of rust or any fraying or damage, or you will see them as small spider-like parts of the cable. Remember, it's a steel cable and it's very small wires wound really tight. So we want to make sure that the entire length of that is intact. Okay, as we follow it out, and we see there's the anchor point for that cable right there. It has two nuts on it. We'll make sure the nuts are in place. Here's a hydraulic line, okay, that controls the hydraulic extension cylinder. Okay, I don't see any leaks in that area. Okay, that's the termination of the cable, but it goes around the other sheave wheel and comes back around this one. All right, there's another sheave wheel. It has two bolts. You look at it, make sure they're in place. And now you'll see a smaller diameter cable that goes out into the midsection and controls the extension of the midsection. As you follow that out, it looks intact. Now remember, we're looking from a bit of a distance here, but it would be obvious if it was damaged. There's the small sheave wheel for the midsection cable, extension cable. Remember, we have an extension cylinder in the base section and extension cables in the midsection and the base section. All right. In this area, you can see the electrical conduit where it goes to it goes back across these few sections, and then it goes to the outside. It goes to the outside through this conduit. Step over here, John. You can see it on the outside. Okay, so the electrical power, the tip, runs through these external conduits here. So you want to check each one of these clamps, make sure it's secure, and that it's not damaged. All right. Back to the waterway. In this area, there's a waterway seal. Okay. This is a telescoping waterway. You see right here, this is smaller diameter than this one. When it retracts, it goes back inside. Okay. This is the midsection waterway, and it retracts into the base section waterway. And you can see the seal over here. There's the seal for this section of the waterway. As we walk along, we're looking at the base rail right here of the midsection. Make sure it's not damaged. Now we're going to look at the fly section. So we're looking at the fly section. And on this side you can also see another electrical cord reel on the outside of the ladder. This is somewhat antiquated. On the newer ladders you won't see a design like this. Nonetheless, we need to look and make sure it's not damaged. Okay, so we follow the rail down, looking for any deformity. Looking at all the attaching hardware, the bolts, make sure they're all in place. All the way out to the tip and make sure the tip is not damaged. Okay. Remember, I'm from an underside vantage point. Okay. This, of course, is the waterway nozzle. We'll take a look at that, make sure that it doesn't have any obvious signs of damage and that all the parts are attached and intact. These mounting bolts right here, there should be 4 of them. 1, 2, 3. And there's the 4th one up on top that I can see right there. Even though this ladder's kind of old, it's still serviceable. It was still certified for use. We use it here at the training center. Come on this side. Now I'm going to look at the rail as we go down on this side, all the attaching hardware. Remember, the most important thing about inspection is to be thorough and take your time and look at everything. So we follow it back this way, looking at the base rails. Also, as I'm walking along, I'm looking at the condition of the rung covers, the ladder rung covers here, these rubber covers. They should all be there, and the stainless strap should be in place. That's like an anti-skid device when you climb the ladder. So I walk back on this side, take a look at the sheave wheel and the extension cable. On this side, it's good. All right, and here's the terminal end of the base section cable that we talked about a minute ago. So I'm looking at the condition of that. Back here. And there's a set of cables on the top that we're going to inspect once we get up there. Okay, now we're back up on top of the aerial. We're going to take a look from this vantage point. I'm going to point out some more things that you need to look at. Okay, here's the extension cables I was talking about. You can see how they're a tightly wound series of small steel wires. They should be smooth and there should be no evidence of corrosion or abrasion or any loose sections. Okay, so you need to look at that carefully all the way out. As we walk out, I can see this one actually has some corrosion on it. Okay, that is cause for some concern, and I'm going to be reporting that to the fire garage. Okay, so you have a cable on either side. Now you can see each of the rungs and the welds. These are called K-braces. Okay, these strengthen the ladder laterally and also strengthen the rungs of the ladder. Okay, right here is a guide plate. You can see it screwed down. And this is a guide plate also. You need to make sure that these are in place. as you inspect. We're going to take a look down the handrails from up here at this vantage point. We're going to look at the handrails all the way down, and we're looking to see if they're straight and there's no evidence of any kind of damage as they go straight down the ladder. Okay? They should be parallel to each other and no bends, dents, dings, or any other damage. Okay? As we work our way along, we're going to be looking at each of the uprights and the welds in the uprights to make sure that they're intact and they're not damaged either. Okay, you can see the welds here for each of the rungs. You want to look at those as you work your way down slowly down the ladder. So again, you can see some attaching hardware here. They should be in place. And then here you can get a close-up of the shiv wheels I was talking about. These wheels that are held in place that guide the cable as the ladder is extended on both sides. Okay, here's a couple more guide blocks. You want to look at those. More attaching hardware, and we're about to leave the bed section. Make our way into the midsection. Once again, in the midsection, you have the extension cables. And down here you can see the rod from the extension cylinder, okay, that drives the entire mechanism. There's the wires, some of the electrical components. Here's what they call a cannon plug. You want to make sure that's intact. This actually gives you an indication that the rungs are aligned. This is the rung alignment indicator. Okay, here's a guide block on the outside. You want to look and make sure that those are intact. Some more guide blocks in this area. All the attaching hardware is in place. And now, here's that cable. You see it goes on the top and comes back underneath. Another set of guide blocks in the midsection. This guides the fly section once it's retracted. Okay, now we're making our way onto the fly section of the ladder. Okay. As you can see, it gets progressively smaller or narrower. In order to be called an aerial ladder, it must be a certain width and it has to be a certain height in order to be rated as an aerial ladder. Okay, here's the electrical cables that we talked about from the underside. It's the top side view. Okay. And here's the termination of the two small extension cables that go on the midsection. So you want to make sure those lock nuts are in place. Okay, this hole right here is for the pinnable waterway. Right now, the waterway is in a firefighting mode. If it's in a rescue mode, this part of the waterway would be pinned right here and the nozzle would be right here. But it's fully extended at this point and it's in the firefighting mode. So we're continuing our inspection out to the very end. You okay, John?
Yeah.
Okay. From the top side, you can see this is the waterway pin. That's going to be difficult because it's under tension. As you can see, I'm drawing this out a little bit at a time. This does not have an appropriate ring handle on it. That will also be reported to the fire garage. This should have a substantial ring handle on it so you can pull that out easily. It also needs to be greased. That's another point I want to make. As a driver engineer, you're responsible for lubricating these simple mechanisms that make your truck functional. If you look at this ladder rung, you can see that it's bent. Can you pick that up from your angle, John?
Yep.
Okay. So this entire rung needs to be replaced. There's a top view of the waterway nozzle, and you can see you have a set of remote controls here for the waterway. This is your communications, hands-free communication. It's a communication. Okay. Right here you have your hands-free communication. This is a speaker that you can talk with the person at the base controls. Okay.
That's good.
Well, let's talk about this.
All right. Ready.
On this side, you have the 110 volt lights. You want to make sure that all the hardware is in place and that it's functional, that it rotates. Okay, this is a 110 volt electrical outlet. All right, so you want to make sure that the wiring there is intact. And you also have another 110 volt light on the other side that obviously needs some work. Okay. In this area, you have 2 aluminum steps that can be deployed when you're working on the ladder. You want to make sure that all the attaching hardware is in place. Remember, somebody's going to be standing on this. You want to make sure it doesn't come loose. They have spring tensioners to hold it in the open position.
That's it.
That's it.